I mean, I think one of the things that I have really been able to do in my career that I'm really thankful for is borrow lessons from one industry and bring it into another. And so for me, the through line is always storytelling.
What are the secrets that drive the businesses you love or nonprofits you admire? Join us as we uncover the surprising ideas at the intersection of causes and brands. I'm Dave Raley.
And I'm Carly Berna. Each episode, learn from leaders of nonprofits and companies that will give you insights that you can put into action. This is the Purpose and Profit Podcast. Boost your nonprofit's donor engagement with Synergy's phone-based solutions. From P2P texting to voice broadcasting or inbound call handling to mid-level solutions, they are your donor engagement team. Visit synergydms.com.
Welcome to the show today. It's a pleasure to welcome Amit Meredith to the podcast. She's a dynamic leader with a remarkable track record in building brands, driving impactful campaigns, and crafting strategic initiatives that make a difference. As the head of marketing for GoFundMe and Classy from GoFundMe, she oversees brand strategy, marketing activations, and growth, helping connect people with causes they care about. Before her work at GoFundMe, Amit made her mark with companies like Warner Brothers Discovery, Samsung, Boots UK, as well as in higher education and nonprofits, including the President's Council and the National Foundation for Fitness, Sports, and Nutrition. With degrees from the University of Florida and NYU Stern, Amit also brings a passion for community involvement and leadership through organizations like Chief and the Harvard Business Review Advisory Council. Super excited to dive into her insights today. Amit, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Okay, so for listeners of our show, we love digging into big brands and lessons we can learn and port from that, which I would argue GoFundMe is a big brand. But let's go back a bit and talk a little bit. Just tell me about your time at Warner Brothers. I mean, that time in history, just what are some things that you learned?
Oh, yes. I loved that chapter. It was so interesting. Starting in 2018, I was actually working on a joint venture with Fullscreen and Sumitomo Corporation in Japan on a venture there that was then eventually bought and merged into what became Warner Media and then Warner Brothers Discovery. So it was a really interesting ride to see how all of these entertainment platforms started to come together between sort of established media and the new emerging, creator economy and social media, bringing all of that together. And what was really fascinating that I've brought over to GoFundMe is how much you can learn about your audience, based on what they want to share with you. So the storytelling and the insights that we get on this platform, as well as the one at Warner, was really, really fascinating. And we started to explore, we did some thought leadership around the power of fandoms and how much having someone care about your characters, or in our case, your cause or your situation, can really unlock their generosity or their willingness to participate in that fandom. And so that has been one of the really neat things to kind of bring over from that experience into GoFundMe.
I'm curious, not to get too into the weeds, but how does one, measure or understand a fandom in the entertainment sector? We'll talk about the social sector here in a bit.
Oh, yeah. It's a great question, actually, because it's one that we really set out to be able to prove. And so one of the beautiful things that you can do in the entertainment space that's a little bit different, but there could be some parallels, is you've got IP, right? And so you know how many stories you could tell with that specific IP. But then you also have the amusement parks or the T-shirts or the, dressing up in cosplay and creating new communities that really start to bring people together who then create new experiences. And that's where that loyalty to that fandom has them participating in storylines or participating in sneak previews that then they go and evangelize on behalf of that film or TV show. And so they really become your word of mouth engine as well as your first focus group. And that has a lot of value when you're investing millions upon millions of dollars in being able to create and then distribute those films in particular.
That's fascinating. You know, I think about, and we're going to talk about influencers today, but I just think about the number of influencers that you see that they clearly have that fandom, and they've like, I don't know if the right word is activate or whatever, but they show up in so many different, you know, venues, right? In the olden days, it was Disney, right? You'd watch a Disney movie and then you mention the theme park and those sorts of IPs. But today you've got like, I just bought tickets to this, comedian Nate Bargatze, you know, everybody knows him now. And the guy's selling out like Climate Pledge Arena, which in our area is like 25,000 people. And it's like, talk about the power of a fandom.
Oh my God, he is so funny. We were just watching his special last night. But I think what is so great about him too, I mean, I think stand-up comedy also, by the way, is like one of the last pure art forms. So I think it's just so impressive. But I think he's so relatable, right? And he kind of brings you into his life, and especially some of the parts that I watched on the special the other day were around, you know, he's like, I do my laundry. Like, this is a gift and I have it ready. Did you see that part?
No, I didn't. But the fact that they even just have any material after, especially I think he's, you know, on TV special number 6 in like 4 years. I'm like, man, you got to live a lot of life to be able to pull that off. I love it.
Yeah. No, he's so talented. And I think that's a great example of where, you know, you think it's sort of like every day in small clubs, and then he's in arenas. I mean, he's coming through, I live in Park City, and he's coming through Salt Lake again this year. He was here last year as well. So I think there's something, you know, really wonderful to what he talks about and then how he delivers it that makes people really, you know, kind of enjoy and root for that and be able to laugh along with him. I think he's so good.
Yeah, I'm really curious how you went, like how your journey went from Warner Brothers to GoFundMe. Like maybe in your mind there's like a nice through line, but to me it's like kind of like a total shift.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, I think one of the things that I have really been able to do in my career that I'm really thankful for is borrow lessons from one industry and bring it into another. And so for me, the through line is always storytelling. You know, I started my career in ad agency world. I went into NBC News where we, you know, ran marketing campaigns around numerous different news programs and digital platforms. And then, you know, kind of took that into a turn in independent filmmaking. And, you know, that is like the purest storytelling. You're literally writing the script. But as I then came back through into the marketing world again, I really just saw that through line of being able to sort of marry what is, you know, true about humans and psychology, along with what is true about storytelling and creativity and inspiring someone to pay attention. And then the last leg, I think, is also, you know, with intent and purpose to act. And so sometimes that's to $1, sometimes it's to a donation, sometimes it's to a signature, but it's really those pillars that have kind of guided all the wonderful opportunities that I've had in my career.
And what would you say is like maybe one of the biggest things you've learned so far from being at GoFundMe?
Just how wonderful and vulnerable and brave the organizers on our platforms are. And even when you're raising on behalf of yourself, or whether you're raising on behalf of a nonprofit or a friend, there's still courage involved in telling your story and hoping that someone will care and that someone will share and like be compelled to act. And I think that it should always be applauded. I've been wildly impressed with the way that people are finding this platform to be a place that you can do that without judgment. There's never nasty comments. There's not, it's a safe place, so to speak. And it's a place where you can actually share the details of what you're going through in a way that, makes you feel in community with others who you know or may not know, like the fundraiser we were talking about before this, with the wildfires, with your yogurt place, like you're in community with people who you've had this shared experience with, and now you're connected to by supporting that yogurt place again and hoping that it gets rebuilt. I think there's something really beautiful to that, and it takes some vulnerability to do that.
Yeah, just some context for those listening. We're recording this kind of right after, or even during this whole different wildfires in California. I previously lived there and have donated through GoFundMe to my favorite yogurt shop in the Palisades. But just from your perspective, now that you've kind of lived through such a huge crisis, like what have you seen, or how have you seen GoFundMe play an impact into the wildfire situation?
I've been, again, so impressed with our teams on this one, from, the product teams to our trust and safety teams, comms, partners, global go-to-market, social. There is, just a huge momentum to rally around the crises. We saw it also with Hurricane Helene and Milton and, a couple other situations. But I think what has been remarkable about the LA wildfire crisis is how much, I say, it kind of unlocks the impact creator in all of us. There's so many people, so many influencers with a following who will find a verified fundraiser on our hub and share it out until it gets to its goal, or, doing collabs. We've done so many collabs on Instagram and other social platforms to be able to reach more audiences with the resources that they need. And I think the nonprofit community has been included in a way alongside the individual fundraisers on our hub in a way that has been, exceptional and driven a lot of attention to, Pasadena Animal Hospital, World Central Kitchen, Direct Relief, along many others that are, just as entrenched and on the ground, as the individuals impacted.
As you've been talking, Amit, I've been thinking about some of the earlier days in digital fundraising. Carly doesn't like for me to share how ancient I am, but I've been around this industry for a while. And one of the things that we've talked about is really the unlock for social media fundraising back in the late 2000s. Was crisis, was the Haiti earthquake. The Haitian earthquake was the main sort of catalytic event at that point in history. And I've talked about how the timing of that relative to Facebook and these social media platforms being a few years into their development and their maturity, i.e. people were much more comfortable becoming consumers related to their Facebook presence. They were, there was a day when people didn't want to put their credit cards in online and all that kind of stuff. Well, I wonder if there are parallels. And I'm curious as to your thoughts on this, because you mentioned the term impact creator. And by the way, GoFundMe puts out a social state of giving report. And one of the things that you talked about in that report was this, patterns in the way supporters of different generations choose to give, share, and interact with causes they care about. And you talked about the rise of these impact creators. So I want you to explain that. But I'm curious, and this may be just to think about, are things like Hurricane Milton, like the wildfires, are those the sort of the modern era of the catalytic event for impact creators raising money? I don't know if you've thought about that, but it's just, as you've been talking, I thought, man, this smells a lot like, 2008, 2009, when donors were responding and giving via social media. And I'm just curious as to your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I like your hypothesis there. I think there is something to these crises that is a rallying moment or a surge that really can, be in lockstep with these sort of changes. And I think when it came to defining impact creators, we did that through the research last year that you mentioned on social state of giving, where, and so now we're able to identify them, right? So it's a behavior that we've basically been able to assign a name to, of a person. Again, they don't have to be, a giant following. It's just, a person who has a social following, who is looking to spread positivity, make a difference, and then, raise money on behalf of, or for themselves or for a cause. And what was great in the exploration around this is, at the time, we had two, sort of points of view around the social space. One was centered on the nonprofit community, and the other centered on the consumer community. And we discussed internally and said, hey, why don't we just look at this holistically? Like, look at the world of social media and how the giving space is showing up there. And let's look at it collectively so that we can best understand those behaviors, because they certainly overlap regardless of who and how you're giving to, though there are certainly nuances there, of course. And so that's what led to that term of the impact creators, where we started to see a few of them do, what I mentioned, where they identify a fundraiser on GoFundMe or not and say, like, let's rally around this person, or let's clear as much medical debt as we can, or let's find a family from this spreadsheet. And each influencer is going to adopt one until they reach their goal. And that means they're going to share and reshare and share in their stories and share via email. And so I think that has been certainly more and more on the rise. And we saw generationally, actually, Gen Z, while their pocket share may not be as large as others, their share of voice is huge. They're sharing causes that matter to them on average of once a week, with millennials not far behind, about once a month, and goes upward from there. And I think there's a lot of power in that is sometimes underestimated in the fundraising spaces, is how much like activating people to share on your behalf. I'm sure you've seen this as well.
Yeah, one of the stats from the Giving Report is that 46% of Gen Z surveyed believe people should share donations online to help spread the word and inspire others. So can you talk about the power of sharing? Like, have you seen that, or do you have an example of like where, kind of like one spark created, a fire, so to say, like a movement from, in this case, Gen Z and their sharing?
Oh, absolutely. And I think what's been interesting is how our product team has also created some solutions around this to ease that burden. As you may have heard in other circles, but as we found in the qualitative part of this research, even if you have donated, there is a hesitation to share that because it feels like you're doing it for the wrong reasons, right? Like that you're badging yourself versus saying, hey, like, trust me, I've given to this cause, and so then you can too. And we do know that people trust causes that or fundraisers that come from someone they know. So there's a really interesting tension between those things. And one of the things that we've seen be really effective in helping to share there is we created what are called GoFundMe profiles, where you can share any fundraiser that you want from GoFundMe, that it can be for a nonprofit, it can be something you've given to or you haven't. And then you put that link into your social profile. And should someone then give to that fundraiser, we have a feature that is called an impact link that will then tell you the power of your sharing. So a friend of mine recently was impacted by those fires, and I was able to share her story a couple times. And so I know exactly how many people gave to her based on my sharing. And that gives me that sort of pride that I know it made a difference for her, but without worrying about any of the, sort of backlash or judgment that some had shared in that research. And so I think that's where we've really seen, the power of Gen Z sharing or millennial sharing, or, kind of continuing that through, be really impactful for the people who are fundraising.
Yeah, I think that'll be a really interesting kind of cultural phenomenon to watch, especially generationally. But, as we were just talking about with the fires, I mean, there's several YouTubers that I'm a big fan of that turns out that they lost their homes, and so I just was watching a video yesterday of channels called Colin and Samir, and they talk a lot about, YouTube and content creation. And so they're sort of like influencers,
Absolutely.
1.5 million followers. And so I wonder if even some of their rawness and authenticity and sharing won't spark, some of that, almost like normalizing, sharing about need online.
Yeah. I mean, talk about vulnerability. That video that they posted was just so remarkable. And what was, it was just so powerful to hear them talk about their experience, but then also like what it meant to have the community rally around them. Dude Perfect actually did a live stream fundraiser that benefited Colin and Samir.
Wow.
And so it was like their whole creator community utilizing, again, a product innovation around our live streaming widget. Not plugging, but just saying like there's ways in which we're trying to serve how people want to fundraise. And then when they received that, how meaningful it was, both of their wives are pregnant, and, just a really remarkable way for them to share that experience. So such a personal experience.
Yeah. I don't know how they were not bawling through that whole video. Maybe they did a bunch of takes because I thought as you heard their stories, but again, normalizing, making it more accessible and okay to talk about those things. I think that's important. I think obviously the visibility when you have Dude Perfect and these major channels promoting it, not to mention the cultural shaping that those influencers tend to have of their audiences. Dude Perfect in particular with Gen Z. I've taken my Gen Z kids to Dude Perfect shows, talk about full circle with the, influencer activations, right? It's just fascinating.
Games this weekend, so it's like full in my house as well.
I love it. Too many tools, not enough impact? Meet Avid, the fundraising agency in the cloud. Unify data, scale engagement in minutes. Learn more at avidai.com. Share helps Christian nonprofits shine with innovative marketing and digital fundraising. But that's not all. They're your tech-savvy partner, building tools to make your work easier and your impact bigger. Ready to grow your mission? Visit sharetalent.co today. Okay, so I want to pivot just a little bit. So GoFundMe supports both nonprofits and purpose-driven businesses, right? Dude Perfect, if they use the GoFundMe, app, right? They were supporting a charity, but they are a business in essence. Which, by the way, if you know anybody there, we'd love to have them on the show. I have emailed Kobe specifically and said, "Hey, buddy, turns out they're a little busy right now." But so if GoFundMe sort of supports both nonprofit and for-profit, essentially purpose-driven businesses, just talk a little bit about how they're innovating on your platform.
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I think what has come up really beautifully and naturally are some of the reasons for innovation, right? So when we talk about the power of sharing and then being able to create the profile and the impact links as solutions, they're always intended to solve some kind of friction that is, happening for someone on the platform. Another thing that we've really looked at a lot recently is around how to include AI opportunities for people who are needing some help finding the right words. We also have created, and that happens in both the creation of the fundraiser and also in the sharing. Sometimes you've given or you're inspired by someone, but then when you're going to share it on your own socials, you kind of want to add something to it where you're I don't know, it says it all here. What do I say?
What do I say? Yeah.
Right. And so I think just identifying some of those friction points, if you will, and solving for them. The streaming widget has been another remarkable one that has done well with people who stream. So creators, there was a Swiftie who was live streaming the concerts, and she, Tess Bone was her name, and she did a beautiful fundraiser for a nonprofit in Indianapolis where the show was, and then again a few more times as well, just, kind of learning how to use the widget and then using it to fundraise on behalf of a nonprofit. And I think the other really interesting innovation that we're working on right now is around nonprofit profiles. So in addition to your personal profile that I mentioned, where you can add your the fundraisers that you want to share and support, there's also an opportunity for nonprofits to have a page that has, their information. There's so many people already who are fundraising on behalf of nonprofits or who are giving to nonprofits on GoFundMe, that we're trying to make it easier and easier for the nonprofits to come and engage with the community that exists there and to build that relationship directly as well. And so I think that's going to be a really interesting innovation that is serving a need that we've started to identify on the platform as well.
It's really interesting because we're talking a lot about social media, and I worked at a nonprofit for 10 years. And in that time, we always tried to figure out how to have an ROI on social media, but it was always really hard to measure. But maybe you see it a little differently just from your perspective of being at GoFundMe. So how do you see social media playing into this fundraising role?
Oh, yes. I mean, I think there's short-term and long-term, right? So in the world of measurement that we all would really love to have be a little more refined than it is, we know that there's activity that you do that is the right thing to do that you're not going to see an immediate return on. But what you will see in the volume of times that, it's your kind of reach and frequency modeling, and how frequently and how much you interact with a message, the more likely you are to remember that message and do something. And so we do have our short-term last click metrics when it comes to social, and frankly to all of our measurement. But then we also look at things like social sentiment or share of voice around a specific topic or around the brand in general. And we're able to see if something that we think is a big deal is actually a big deal, or if something that we didn't think was a big deal is actually. And so that, those tools have also been invaluable in helping us understand how we are being thought of or spoken about in those spaces. And there are tools that care just for social, but that also for the internet as a whole. And I think those give us a really nice holistic view, as well as longitudinal brand studies, and those, making sure that our consumer insights team, they're just phenomenal at looking, month over month or quarter over quarter, what's changing in terms of consideration or perception, any of those things that give us signal to say, hey, we've got to show up here a little bit differently, or this seems to be emerging. What kind of content do we need to create to help answer that? And I think there have been some great examples even recently where people have questions about certain things as they get exposure to the platform. And so we'll proactively put out social content that points to either existing web content or help center content that we have that addresses that specific question and just distribute it in new ways. And so those are the tools that, are they going to measure against a specific business goal immediately? It'd be hard, but you can kind of see that by surrounding a user or a potential customer with that information, that we are creating a scenario that they can be successful in finding what they're looking for.
It seems like a lot of what it's about is being able to candidly reach new audiences and, get exposed to different things. I think that's why this concept of impact creators, influencer marketing is in that sort of family, is a growing thing. And I think charities certainly and businesses would do well to think about how do they tap into those audiences, to put it, plainly.
I think you're spot on. And I think one of the things that we had to learn in doing this ourselves is being willing to let others carry your message. There's so much for those of us in marketing. They're like, we've crafted the right words in the right way. And, but the less precious you are about that, and the more you really empower your supporters to carry that on for you, the more that like person to person connection to the fundraiser or the campaign or the cause or the mission starts to come to life for them in different ways. And so I think that is really a lot of the power of, what we're learning from that can be applied into the nonprofit space as well.
Yeah. I think about and I would love for you to share about just some thoughts, having been on both the for-profit side and really worked with nonprofits and kind of worked in both worlds. I think about that in relation to how companies and brands have had to, quote unquote, learn how to work with influencers, because to your point, the brands can be quite controlling about, all of the things. And so, I don't think it's just they all relaxed and got casual, but they learned how to work with influencers. So I'm curious, having now worked with both the for-profit and nonprofit sector, what piece of advice would you give to nonprofit leaders just from that experience?
Yes. All right. Two examples come to mind. One is with the Massachusetts Teachers Association, who I worked with when I was early in my career, and they would have just a beautiful spot every year supporting public schools in Massachusetts, and they would often have a big name director actually who wanted to, do the spot for them, and they would then evangelize. And this was a little bit ahead of the days of social media, not to date myself too much here, but that they really would invite the people on the cast, or like that we would always have, real teachers or real support workers in the spots, and really kind of push on the authenticity there. But then when it comes to the influencer part of it, I'm thinking about the National Foundation for Fitness, Sports, and Nutrition, which is the nonprofit arm of the President's Council for Fitness, Sports, and Nutrition, which, is appointed by the president during whichever administration. And in this particular instance, we were celebrating the 60th anniversary of the National Foundation and the President's Council. Mm-hmm. And we had this kind of funny idea to do during a gathering. So there was 300 or so people at the celebration, and we had what we called, it was a selfie punching bag. And so you would punch the, like stand up thing.
Okay.
And it would not work, but it took a selfie as you were punching, like it would click go. And then so you were creating some fun asset from this experience that was then shared out with others, and they were like, oh my God, this is the silliest thing. You're like mid punch and, celebrating the 60th anniversary of the President's Council. And that was a really great way to actually invite in some more, content that you want to share. I think that's what also becomes really key in the social spaces is like, what are you proud to share? Typically it's something that somebody doesn't know or that they may vicariously enjoy with you. And so I think that that's kind of been the key when you think about how it applies for nonprofits, is really creating something that people want to share or something new, interesting, different, that's empowering for them, that can somehow feel both, close to your cause, but also individualized.
Yeah. Well, we bring it full circle to one of our earlier points. And by the way, we always like to end with a lightning round at the end. So we'll go to that in just a minute. But I just want to underscore your point about even the research you all did at Warner Brothers around fandoms. And, what does it look like for your charity or your business to think about your fandom? In some sense, that's like kind of a weird way to say it, but what does it look like to cultivate and activate those folks who can be passionate about, especially in an era where those folks are themselves impact creators, right? They have their own circles of influence.
Yes. I love that.
Awesome.
Okay, so we've come to our favorite part of the podcast, which you're unprepared for, but I think you'll have great answers. So we're going to do a lightning round. There's, I think, like 6 questions. So just name the thing that comes to your mind first. So the first question is, if you could instantly become an expert in any skill, what would it be?
Coding.
Ooh,
That's
what kind of code?
answer.
I mean, just coding in general, or?
Yeah, I mean, my kids are doing it. And I think it's also like, it reminds me when I went to NYU, I did this joint program in film production and MBA. And one of the things that was so fascinating is like learning the technical aspect of the craft allowed me to then be a stronger producer and storyteller and like know what equipment and what kind of talent I needed in order to do that. And I think because so much of what we do at GoFundMe is product based. And, so when I want to say like, oh, could we do this? If I knew a little bit more, if I could, learn it like that, then I could say, oh, well, you could just, write some of this and it'll do that for you. And so I think it'd
just
be
ask
pretty
AI. It'll write the code for you.
Right. I mean, truly. There we go.
All right, second question. What's your guilty pleasure TV show or movie?
Ooh, guilty pleasure. I take no guilt in anything I consume. But I think, what am I enjoying right now? Watching The Agency, which is the American version of a show called Le Bureau, which was a French show about basically like the French CIA and all the inter-office dynamics, as well as like the personal, like they're, undercover agents who then also have personal lives, and then how love gets in the way. And so it has this, you're kind of rewatching something, but it's new because it's new people. But, there's one character that I'm like, oh, she's like, that specific French actress who has this, sort of way about her. So I think that's one of the things, maybe a little more obscure, but it's really good. The Agency. It's on Paramount Plus.
Interesting. Haven't heard of that one. If you could donate $1 million to any cause, what would it be?
Breast cancer.
Hear, hear. What's the most random thing on your bucket list?
The one that drives my husband crazy is that I really want to take an RV and drive to Mount Rushmore. It would be like 10 hours or so from where we are. And I'm like, when else are we going to go? Like, let's make it an adventure. So I think I, like many people, would like to hit all 50 states. I'm at 35 right now. So, a few more to go. But I think that the RV one, he's like, why?
That sounds like a good retirement goal.
Right. Exactly.
All right. What is a surprising fact about you that most people wouldn't guess?
That I'm one of 6 kids.
Oh.
Okay.
Same marriage. That's usually the next question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where are you at in the birth order?
I'm second, though I joke that sometimes my sister still thinks she's an only child, even though we're like 20 months apart. And she'll laugh at that, hopefully, if she hears it. But no, I'm second in We are 5 girls and 1 boy. My brother is 5th in the lineup, so it's wild.
Good job, brother. I'm by the way, I have to say, I'm one of 5 and I have 4 sisters and I'm the second to last. So I am familiar with this placement in the birth and gender order.
So we have some stories to compare, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
And last question, if you could switch lives with anyone for a day, who would it be?
Oh. Gosh, I don't know. My brain just went 5 places at once. You know what? This one might be like a little cheesy, but I would switch with my kids. My daughter's 10, my son is 9, but they're in such a stage of life where like everything is so new and adventurous and interesting, and they're kind of just learning about the world in new ways. And there's something so liberating about that, and they get to go to PE all the time and recess, and I think there's just something. My son we worked on this curiosity project this weekend, and it's like, pick something and make a presentation. I'm like, oh, that's so fun. Yeah. I mean, I started with like something and I was like, no, that's too high stress. So I went the opposite way.
I love it. Well, and just to get a perspective, right? We've never had anybody answer the question with that. So that's a thinker of them. So I love that. Well, thank you, Amit, for being on the show. Thanks for the investment, certainly in the time for the show, but also just in your career and what you're investing in and helping move generosity forward. And the work that GoFundMe and Classy are doing on that front is such a gift. So thank you.
Thank you. This was so much fun, you guys. I appreciate it. So good to know you.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, I hope you learned something today. I hope you were challenged. I hope you were introduced to some ideas. And until next time.
For over 40 years, Dickerson Baker has been a trusted partner to nonprofits across the country and the globe. They've worked with thousands of organizations and helped raise billions of dollars to support meaningful missions. Their expertise spans fundraising, leadership development, and strategic growth. They empower nonprofits to achieve extraordinary results and make a lasting impact in their communities. Dickerson Baker, advancing nonprofits.